We read so much about Avram, our patriarch, the founding patriarch of the Jewish people, and Sarah, Imenu, who was his partner in everything. How they were barren, they had no child. At the age of 99, miraculously, Avram is able to father a child. Sarah Imenu regains her youth, and she becomes fertile. She's able to conceive a child. This is, to them, this is beyond ecstasy. So we explain why. Because what was Avram's objective and value in life? Only to bring about God's glory, to espouse monotheism. He and his wife, as it says, he converted the men to monotheism, she converted the women to monotheism. But a person doesn't live forever. So if you have no child to carry on with that work, everything comes to an end. So the reason why they wanted to have that child was to continue disseminating and addressing the objective of creation, of existence. That the world should recognize who the master is, who the creator is. It's for God's glory. And ultimately, to be the father of the nation, the people that the world was created for, to be able to be qualified to accept the Torah at Sinai. That's what they live for. Now, Avram, we spoke about the greatest challenge he had was the Akedah. And he succeeded at the time of the Akedah, and he would have slaughtered his son, if not for the angel intervening and said to him, do not touch the lad, withdraw your hand. Okay, now Avram has a son. At this moment, he's 37 years old. He's single, he never married. He hasn't married yet. He has to locate a wife. At that moment, right after the Akedah, the Torah goes and speaks about his brother's family, who was born to them. And these are his nephews and nieces. And his great niece, which is Lavan's sister, is Rivka. Rebecca. He's informed by Hashem that Yitzchak's soulmate, who was qualified to be the matriarch, was born. Okay? Except she's born, you have to wait a little bit of time until she's mature enough to be taken as a wife. Fast forward 3 years later, he summons Eliezer. Eliezer is dedicated servant. His disseminator, his facilitator of many things. He oversees all his affairs, his financial affairs, his spiritual affairs. He's a great man. Eliezer Eved Avram. Eliezer, the slave, not the servant, the slave of Avram. He was a chattel of Avram. The Torah refers to him as Damesek Eliezer. Damesek. What is the meaning of Damesek? In Hebrew, Damascus, Syria, is referred to as Damesek. So one interpretation is that Eliezer, the slave of Avram, his origin was Damascus. Now, we know that the Torah, if it gives us any information, it's only because that information is pertinent to know who he is. We know he's Eliezer. Does it make a difference if he came from Damascus or he came from Brownsville, Brooklyn? It's all the same thing. Why is Damascus so important? And when did Avram refer to him as Eliezer the Damascus? When he was told that the land is going to be given to he's going to inherit the land. So Avram says to God, but what's it all worth? I have no heir. My slave Eliezer the Damascus, he will be my heir. He will inherit me. So what's it all worth? So God says to him, no. Your physical child, the child that will emanate from your innards, that will be your child. And that child will be your heir. That's the only time Eliezer is referred to as Eliezer the Damascus. When Avram says to God, but Eliezer the Damascus is going to be my heir. God responds, no, it's not Eliezer the Damascus, it's going to be your child. Okay? Why at that moment did he refer to him as Damascus Eliezer? And the Torah shares it with us. And why did Avram say Damascus? So there's a basic question to ask. God had promised Avram that if he leaves his homeland, his birthplace, his family, he will have children. To date, he hasn't had a child yet. Yishmael was not his child. The child was meant to be from Sari Menu. They had no children together. God says, the land will be your children, your children's. So he says, what's it all worth? My slave will be my heir. What do you mean slave will be your heir? God said, you're going to have a child. That was originally, you were told, if you leave your homeland, your birthplace, and your family, you're going to have a child. He hasn't had the child yet. So what's he worried about? God is going to be good on his word. So what are you worried that Eliezer, the Damascus, is going to be your heir? Just a basic question. Now, the Gemara tells us that Damascus is an acronym. What's the acronym? Dole umashke b'Torah Sharabo. That all the Torah that Avram knew, which was communicated by God, he taught everything to Eliezer, his slave. Eliezer was a holy man. And the word Damascus Eliezer means Dole umashke b'Torah Sharabo. He would draw from the well springs of his teacher, and he would disseminate that Torah to the world. So the word Damascus is what? Means he was his primary student who was mentored by Avram, and all that Avram knew, he taught Eliezer. Now, in the Torah speaks about the children of Moshe and the children of Aaron. And after it says, these are the children of Moshe and Aaron, it only mentions Aaron's children. It doesn't mention Moshe's children. Moshe's biological children. But if we're speaking about the sons of Aaron and Moshe, why aren't the sons of Moshe mentioned? So the Gemara answers, and Rashi cites the Gemara, if you teach Torah to your fellow's child, and you mentor him and you imbue him with Torah, he's considered your son. It's the equivalent, he's your son. Where's this learned from? Because we speak of the children of Moshe and Aaron, and it only mentions Aaron's children. Because the children of Aaron were the students of Moshe. All the Torah they knew was only through Moshe. Therefore, they're considered his spiritual children. God values it as if they're your children. So Avram thought maybe when God says you'll have a child, we're not talking about a physical child, which would be a spiritual child. Because since all the Torah that he had learned, he had communicated to Eliezer, and Eliezer became imbued with the Torah totally, whatever Eliezer's innate worth is due to Avram. It's like his child. That's what he said to God. Damascus Eliezer, the Eliezer who draws from the well springs of my Torah, he will be my heir. God says, no, your physical child will be heir. This is not a spiritual heir. This is a physical heir. Your physical son will be your heir. That's understanding. Okay? The Midrash tells us that when Eliezer went to seek out the hand of Rivka for Yitzchak, he immediately put gold bracelets on her hands, he put a nose ring, and when Lavan, her brother, who was not a good guy, sees them, he gets excited. The man's a rich man. He wants to see who he is. He runs out into the courtyard and he sees a person who's radiating holiness, tremendous radiance. And he thinks to himself, his uncle Avram, he looked just like Avram Avinu. The radiance which emitted from his face almost looked like Avram's uncle. And he confused it. So you see, Eliezer was an ordinary person. He was a devout, holy person. He was an extension of his master, Avram. Therefore, he had mistaken him for Avram. Okay? Let's go back a little bit. When he gave the very specific instructions to his slave, Eliezer, he had all kinds of conditions attached to it and guarantees. And he adjured him that if he violates any of the conditions, he will forfeit his share in the world to come and the physical world. And he's going into the oblivion. Because he didn't want him to deviate as much as an iota from the instructions. It should be a specific girl, a specific family. It's not enough she should be righteous. It has to be from his own family. Because the inborn characteristics of his family were similar to himself. And he adjures him by the God of heaven and the God of the earth. And why is he putting him in a position he has to take an oath? The man himself is the essence of holiness. All the Torah that he had studied, he taught to him. And he's imbued with that Torah. And he has all these special qualities. It's almost like an insult. You've done business with a person for 50 years, and every transaction was a success, exactly as the man said. His word is as good as gold. And say, by the way, although we've done business 50 years, I want a signed contract and I want a witness, because just in case you don't keep your word, that's what I wanted. Person says, are you kidding? We've been through thick and thin for 50 years. I never, ever disappointed you. I could have taken advantage. I never did. And now you're suspecting me. It's the ultimate insult. The ultimate insult. Here, Eliezer went to war together to defeat the 4 kings. He was through thick and thin with Avram, proved himself to the nth degree. And Avram says, if you should take a woman, not as I instruct you, not from my family, whatever it may be, you're condemned in the physical world and condemned in the spiritual world. Where are you coming from? Is there a basis, is an indication that you suspect that I'm not going to keep to the instruction? But Eliezer took the oath. But why was Avram so demanding in this particular area? We have a deal, $100,000 deal, $1 million deal, $1 billion deal. There, we say in English, every man has his price. Everybody has his price. When I'm dealing with the world's at stake, where the objective of creation is at stake, how certain do I have to be? It's a different reality of dealing with here. If Eliezer should deviate as much as an iota, not follow the instruction, you know what that means? The future of the Jewish people is not going to be. Because a patriarch has to have an appropriate matriarch. And Avram understood who the matriarch has to be. Not only that, he was informed after the Akedah through divine communication that Rivka was born. He knows exactly who it is. She's the only one qualified to be the matriarch that ultimately should be a Jewish people. What happens if Eliezer chooses to deviate from that? It's impossible. There's nothing impossible. But we've been through so much, and I proved myself. We're dealing a different realm of value. The realm of value now is the objective of creation. And if we mess up now, it's messed up forever. It's not going to be. Therefore, you adjured him by the God of heaven and earth that if he should deviate as much as an iota, he forfeits the physical world, he forfeits the spiritual world. Eliezer says to his master, what happens if the woman doesn't want to come back? What about this? All kinds of questions. Avram says, you have nothing to worry about. God will send his angel and you will succeed in the mission. You don't have to worry. But initially, he was concerned. How was Avram so certain? Avram never shared with the servant as much as close as he was with him, that God had come to him after the Akedah, because he wasn't there at the time, that Rivka was born at that moment. And the reason why he was informed was she will be the matriarch. So if that's the case, he wasn't concerned. You go through the motions, you go take the trek where you have to go, you will find her. God will provide that wife. For my son, you just have to retrieve her, bring her back to the Canaan. That's what it's about. Eliezer wasn't aware of that. So he asked all kinds of questions. If she doesn't want to come back, should I bring your son there? And if I can't locate her, what should I do? Not a problem. God will send his angel. You're going to succeed in your mission. And that was the end of the story, but he took the oath. I was thinking, again, I've shown this many times, that whenever there's going to be a monumental change in spirituality regarding the world, Satan always intervenes and doesn't allow it to happen. I'll give you an example. We're in the 40th year of the desert, wandering for 40 years in the desert. The generation of Sinai, which was the generation of the spies, they all died. This is the new generation. That at the time of the spies, they were less than 20 years old. The new generation is about to go in to the promised land. What was the sustenance in the desert? The manna. They were eating man. And they come to Moshe, says, you know something? Something doesn't make sense. It's unheard of. For 40 years, we've been ingesting this miracle food. And we've never done our bodily functions. You know what could be? After 40 years of ingesting this, eventually it will expand in our intestines. Our intestines will burst and we're going to die. Yeah, this is the discussion among themselves. This is the thought planted in their minds. And they come to Moshe with a complaint. We want to be normal people. We want to eat normal food. We want to do our bodily functions. But the basis for that claim was, because they were afraid they continue eating this food that doesn't exit their bodies, eventually they're going to die from it, because when it expands, the intestines are going to burst. Where did they come up with such a far-fangled concern? Like they said, put that in their heads. Satan. Why? They're about to enter the promised land. They're about to conquer the land. They're about to bring about the conclusion of their nationhood, which is settling in Israel, each person receiving his portion, each tribe having its identity. This is the ultimate power base for spirituality in the world. You know when that's about to happen? Satan tries to topple the apple cart. That's what he tries to do always. Immediately, what does God do? He sends vipers, and the Jews are being bitten, and they're dying. Why? Because you people, you ingrates. Here I give you food, miracle food. It nourishes you at every level. You don't do your bodily functions, so you don't have to be inconvenienced to go out of the camp to do your bodily functions. And you tell me it's all a plot to have you die? How do you see it it's such a perverted, distorted way? The answer is, Satan put that in their minds. Whenever the transition to a higher level of spirituality takes place, he tries to interfere. In the worst way, the Akkadi tried to interfere. Avraham Avinu, he wants his servant to embark on an agency to find the matriarch of the Jewish people, which is what the most important moment in his life at this moment, Avram. Why? Because if you don't have a proper matriarch, it will manifest itself that the Jewish people are not going to be at the level they should be. Because the patriarch needs an appropriate matriarch. So if this is the case, now in the most extreme way, Satan is going to try to undermine this agency. That it should not work out the way it should work out. For the same reason. We're at a monumental moment to ultimately to bring about the ultimate. So what does Avram have to do? He has to secure every hatch that regardless of the gale winds blowing on the ocean, the typhoon that's about to hit, we have to deflect everything. How do I guarantee it that no matter what, the matriarch will be the proper matriarch who God communicated him through divine communication that is going to be Rivka. Therefore, he adjures his slave, despite his track record. Avram can't take any chances. If you should deviate as much as an iota, you forfeit your share in the world to come and in the physical world. And Eliezer understood it. Eliezer was not insulted because he understood the reality that this mission is one of a kind of mission. And this, in the worst way, Satan's going to try to undermine it. It's interesting. There's a mitzvah of procreation between husband and wife. In addition to the obligation of procreation, a man has conjugal obligations to his wife. It's Torah, conjugal obligations. Now, when are these conjugal obligations in place? A Jew must keep family purity. A woman, if she's menstruating, she has a cycle. So many days she menstruates, she's contaminated, she goes to the mikveh. To relieve herself of that contamination, she should be permitted to the husband. The obligation of conjugal obligation is the night that she comes back from the mikveh. Okay? The obligation of a Torah scholar, his night of obligation is Friday night, Shabbos. So the question is why? Why the mikveh night and why on Shabbos? So there's a word from the Shalach Kodesh, the Holy Shalach, and he explains when a person cohabits, the moment of procreation, the soul goes into the child if there's conception. That's the moment of the soul. And it's a very important moment. If that soul is going to be a special soul, you know what's going to happen? Satan's going to have a problem in the future. So Satan does whatever he can at that moment to somehow put limitations on that soul while the act of procreation is taking place. So therefore Hashem says, a man is naturally attracted to a woman. This man suppressed his desire for his wife for all this time for the sake of the mitzvah of observing family purity. Measure for measure, as you resisted your wife and suppressed the desire, and she also, I will keep Satan at bay when you cohabit, when she comes back from the mikveh. Because this is the first time that she's permitted to you. So the reward for that, measure for measure, Satan will not tamper with that soul. So if there's going to be a child conceived, that child is a protected soul. Because Satan at that moment wants to topple the apple cart. He wants to somehow minimize the value of that soul. Shabbos is Mein Olam Haba. Shabbos is the most spiritual day in the year. God's presence exists on Shabbos. It's as a semblance of the world to come. Being Shabbos, having a semblance of the world to come, there's no trespassing. Satan cannot come in. The holiness of Shabbos protects that potential child who's going to be born. He can't tamper with that soul. That's why it's the mikveh night, the conjugal obligation, and Friday night, which is Shabbos, which has that degree of holiness, which is God's presence. This wards off and keeps Satan at arm's length from the soul that's going to be conceived. Avram understands this is the most monumental moment of existence now. Will we succeed getting the appropriate matriarch for Yitzchak or not? If it's not, the Jewish people are not going to be what they're supposed to be. Therefore, Avram leaves no stone unturned. Every guarantee to make sure that this mission will be a successful mission. And that's why he adjures him, despite how much he demonstrated his dedication to his master, still not enough. Because Satan, you never know the shenanigans he could come up with, and he could topple the apple cart. Therefore, Avram says there's no wiggle room here. It will be as I instructed, and that's why he adjured his slave, his servant, although he's so dedicated, to make sure and guarantee beyond any doubt that the objective of creation will be met through having the matriarch for the patriarch.